Hello, I'm Maria Titizian.
And I'm Rubina Margosian, and this is the Week in Review.
Every week, we bring you the stories shaping Armenia and the region.
From politics and policy to social issues and conflict, we break down the news and what it means for you.
This week in the news, Armenia condemns attack on Iran, urges calm. A $500 million public-private partnership to build cutting-edge AI infrastructure in Armenia is unveiled by Firebird, the Armenian Government, and NVIDIA. A gas explosion in Gegharkunik kills 5, injures over a dozen. These stories and more in our weekly roundup of the news.
Armenia's foreign ministry condemned Israel's attack on Iran, calling for an immediate halt to hostilities and adherence to international law. Yerevan warned that the unilateral strike coming ahead of the next round of negotiations threatens ongoing peace efforts, regional stability, and global security. Prime Minister Pashinyan also condemned the attack during the GlobSec 2025 forum in Czechia, warning that it threatens the fragile stability of the region and expressed Armenia's deep concern. Meanwhile, Secretary of the Security Council Armenian Government stated that the escalation is not only a threat to Iran and the Middle East, but also poses a challenge for Armenia. He emphasized that the primary threat to Armenia's security remains a conventional one, military threats directed both at Armenia and the broader region. Korean added that Armenia is continuing its efforts to help foster regional stability. Against the backdrop of Israel's attack on Iran, Armenia's Deputy Defense Minister Arman Sargsyan said that the situation along the Armenia-Azerbaijan border remains relatively stable. Speaking to reporters in Parliament, Sargsyan noted that there are no alarming developments on the ground at this time. While he acknowledged that every regional escalation is a cause for concern, he also said that Armenia is prepared to defend itself within its capabilities. He also emphasized that Armenia must do everything politically possible to prevent further escalation in the region. Well, Israel has launched a large-scale military operation targeting multiple sites across Iran, including locations reportedly linked to nuclear and missile programs. Iranian sources say the strikes resulted in casualties, including senior military officials and nuclear experts. In response, Iran launched a wave of drones towards Israel. The escalation has led to airspace closures in parts of the region, and several flights were also cancelled in Yerevan. Meanwhile, more than 10 planes en route to Dubai from cities like Moscow, Minsk, and Kazan were diverted to Baku due to airspace restrictions over Iran, Iraq, and Israel. Some passengers on these flights were of Armenian origin or had Armenian surnames. The Union of Armenians of Russia has appealed to the foreign ministries of both Russia and Armenia, urging them to take all necessary steps to ensure the safety of those Armenian passengers forced to land in Baku amid the unfolding crisis.
In the meantime, Azerbaijan and Turkey are carrying out several joint military exercises in Nakhichevan. Indestructible Brotherhood, which is a computer-assisted command staff exercise, and Mustafa Kemal Atatürk, which features a live-fire tactical exercise. They included tank, mechanized, and commando units and combat tasks, which will utilize artillery, air defense, and aviation units. And the Pakistani government has confirmed the sale of 40 advanced fighter jets to Azerbaijan for a total of $4.6 billion. The JF-17 Block 3 aircraft are joint Chinese-Pakistani production. Baku had purchased 16 units just last year. Reports of additional acquisition came last month. It is unclear when these aircraft will be delivered. In comparison, Armenia's air force is very modest, with just 4 advanced Su-30 fighter jets purchased from Russia back in 2019. The initial order was for 12, but only 4 have been delivered. In recent years, as we've mentioned before, India and France have emerged as Armenia's principal arms suppliers, effectively replacing Russia's former dominant role. And this week, a delegation from India's National Defense College visited Yerevan on what they said was a familiarization visit.
And this week, Foreign Minister Arat Mirzoyan was in France, where he took part in 2 high-level international events. Early in the week, he attended the 3rd UN Ocean Conference in Nice, an important moment for Armenia as it prepares to host COP17 next year. Within the framework of the conference, Armenia and France co-organized an event called From Mountains to Oceans, Preserving Biodiversity Across Environmental Boundaries for a Sustainable Future. And later, Mirzoyan traveled to Marseille for the inaugural Raisina Mediterranean Conference, a new India-France platform for political and strategic cooperation. There, he joined India's foreign minister in a panel titled The Next Special Relationship, Deepening the Strategic Partnership between the Indo-Pacific and Europe, highlighting Armenia's ambitions in regards to regional connectivity and geopolitical diplomacy. Mirzoyan welcomed the growing ties between France and India and emphasized that Armenia, located at the crossroads of Europe and Asia, can play a key role in bridging the Indo-Pacific and Europe. With maritime routes facing growing challenges, he said Armenia is investing in overland connectivity and infrastructure to become a vital terrestrial corridor linking East and West.
In other news, Council of Europe Secretary General Alain Berset was in Armenia for a series of high-level meetings with Prime Minister Pashinyan, President Vahakan Khachaturian, and other senior officials. He also delivered a public lecture and met with students at Yerevan State University. The Council of Europe described the visit as timely, taking place at a pivotal moment for the South Caucasus, and noted that the Secretary General came to Yerevan to reaffirm the Council's support for a swift signature of the peace agreement between Armenia and Azerbaijan. The statement emphasized the Council's commitment in backing Armenia's ongoing democratic reforms through its 2023-2026 Action Plan for Armenia, which has an initial budget of 19 million euros. On top of that, the 2.8 million euro response package is helping bolster institutions, protect human rights, and support communities hosting refugees. With Armenia set to host the 8th summit of the European Political Community in the spring of 2026, talks also touched on how the Council of Europe can contribute to strengthening the region's place in Europe's emerging democratic security framework.
And speaking of Europe,
yes,
Azerbaijan state oil and gas company SOCAR signed a 10-year contract to supply Germany with gas. The contract signed with Germany's state-owned energy company envisages annual volumes to gradually increase to 1.5 billion cubic meters, with deliveries to start this year. Germany said this serves as a testament to the strong relationship between Germany and Azerbaijan.
And last week, 2 teenagers from the village of Der in Armenia's Sunik region were reported missing, initially feared to have crossed into Azerbaijani territory. A criminal case was opened over possible abduction, but the boys were found by the end of that day. According to their parents, they never left Armenian territory. Disoriented by heavy fog, they stayed in place to avoid crossing the border. Once visibility improved, they made their way back home safely.
And Prime Minister Pashinyan continues to call for the resignation of Catholicos Karagin II, accusing him of violating his vow of celibacy, fathering a child, and questioning the legitimacy of his position. He also began referring to the Catholicos by his secular name, Gatrich Nersesyan. Pashinyan called on followers of the Armenian Apostolic Church to help him liberate the Holy See and elect a new Catholicos. He outlined religious and moral criteria for forming a coordinating group to lead the effort, saying that he would select the first 10 members personally. In the midst of this, Karagin II traveled to the United Arab Emirates without disclosing the purpose of his visit. Upon his return, supporters gathered at the airport to greet him. Among them were opposition figures like former National Security Service Chief Artur Vanetian and former Artsakh Ombudsman Ruben Melikian. And Armenia's first president, Levon Ter-Petrosyan, visited the Catholicos. This was much earlier in the week, and expressed his full support while strongly condemning what he described as unconstitutional encroachments by the Armenian authorities against the 1,700-year-old Armenian church. And the narrative with situation with Ter-Petrosyan continued. Just more recently today, he also said that, he brought this example about how a Russian Tsar, Nikolai II, wanted to take ownership of the or confiscate the property of the Armenian Apostolic Church, and the Armenian people rose up, and he changed his mind. And we're mentioning this just because of the vocabulary that's being used, and he's saying something like, "Who's this blasphemous traitor that the people cannot conquer?" Well, that's that. And also, the Armenian Revolutionary Federation called the regime's deplorable agenda and rhetoric targeting one of the most vital pillars of Armenia's national identity clearly anti-national and unconstitutional. And former President Serge Sargsyan warned that the clashes between Pashinyan and the church could spiral into civil war. The Catholicos of the Great House of Gilika also voiced concern, warning that the tone of the debate risks deepening social tensions.
Well, while the prime minister is trying to replace the Catholicos, Rubina, the opposition is trying to replace the prime minister. This week, the opposition I Have Honor faction announced Masi's mayor, David Hampartsumian, as its nominee for prime minister. Hampartsumian is facing criminal charges for using violence with a weapon against demonstrators during the 2018 revolution. Under Armenian law, to initiate an impeachment process against the prime minister, the opposition must present an alternative candidate and secure the backing of at least 36 MPs. The I Have Honor faction currently holds 6 seats, while the Armenia Alliance has 28. The Armenia Alliance has expressed its support for Hampartsumian's nomination. Alliance member Ishkhan Sahatelian told reporters that the document with 28 signatures from their MPs is ready, awaiting the start of the impeachment process. He noted, however, that according to their colleagues from the I Have Honor faction, they do not currently have the 2 additional votes needed to initiate the process.
These are two stories that are never going to lead anywhere. So,
right, but we keep talking about it.
We keep talking about it because this seems to be our political reality on the ground. And I think both sides, even Nikol Pashinyan realizes that he's not going to impeach, let's just say, the Catholicos. And the opposition realized that they're not going to impeach Pashinyan because they don't have the votes. They've been naming candidates for months now. None of them are basically even sticking at this point. And every week in review, we announce the name of a new candidate probably, and they don't even have the votes.
They don't have the votes, and the prime minister has Facebook. Yeah? You know, I was away for a few days, Rubina, and all I kept seeing was that he keeps going after the Catholicos. I mean, I understand that there are issues, but to do it in this way, to do it in this format, when the whole region is up in flames at the moment, it's...
Well, you know, the working group that's supposed to, find a new nominee for the Catholicos and vet this person. And his criteria for people who should be on this group, on this working, in this part of this working group are like people who've at least observed Lent once in their life, who've at least, they pray, and people who've, what was another one?
That's it, Rubina, you cannot be on that group. No, we're bordering on the absurd at the moment.
We are. I think that's exactly the case with.
Yeah. Indeed.
Yeah, these stories. Well, tensions over trade continue between Armenia and Georgia. Another not very clear story here. This week, Georgia blocked the import of 10,000 Armenian flower stems, citing the discovery of a quarantine pest. Armenia is Georgia's second largest flower supplier after Ecuador, and in just the first 4 months of this year, Georgia imported $1.3 million worth of flowers from Armenia. Interestingly, this comes just 1 week after Russia also banned the import of certain flowers from Armenia, also citing pest concerns. Meanwhile, Armenia's exporters are still dealing with long customs delays. While shipments of alcoholic beverages to Russia via Georgia have resumed, inspections continue to cause major slowdowns, some lasting over months. Armenian officials say they've received no clear explanation for this scrutiny. To ease the backlog, Armenia State Revenue Committee temporarily suspended Armenian cargo trucks from crossing into Georgia, citing congestion at Georgian checkpoints. They say the ban will stay in place until Georgia resolves its customs bottlenecks.
And, some good news. Firebird, an AI cloud company founded by Armenians based in San Francisco and Yerevan, announced plans to build the first and largest AI supercomputer not only in Armenia, but in the entire region. The launch of the project is set for next year, in 2026. It will be powered by NVIDIA's latest Blackwell GPUs. These are graphics processor units, and backed by a $500 million public-private investment by Firebird, the Armenian government, Team Group, and the Afayan Foundation. High-tech industry minister Mkhitar Hayrabedian announced during the weekly cabinet meeting that the data center will feature thousands of next-generation GPUs and an infrastructure capable of consuming up to 100 megawatts of electricity. Armenia has pledged to provide the necessary energy and resources to support the center's operation. This massive investment will enable Armenia to offer cloud-based AI computing power to Armenia's startup ecosystem and AI specialists, though the majority will be offered as cloud services to companies worldwide. The project promises to propel Armenia as a regional tech hub. Prime Minister Pashinyan proposed that the data center be located inside the academic city zone. This would foster synergy between education and technology while tapping into the local talent pool. Thanking the Armenian diaspora for its support, Pashinyan described the project as a concrete example of effective Armenia-diaspora cooperation.
A deadly explosion in the town of Jambarak in Armenia's Gegharkunik region left 5 people dead and injured more than a dozen. The blast tore through the upper floors of a 4-story residential building. While the exact cause is still under investigation, authorities have launched a criminal case with a gas explosion currently considered the most likely scenario.
And former Prime Minister and Speaker of Parliament Hovig Abrahamian has been arrested. He faces multiple charges, including money laundering, abuse of power, and illegal business activity. According to Armenia's Prosecutor General's office, Abrahamian used proxies to manage a company while still in office between 2006 and 2016. Investigators say this allowed him to legitimize property acquired through criminal means. The indictment alleges that Abrahamian interfered with the company's lawful operations and unlawfully took over its shares through his brother and other associates. He reportedly made around 230 million dirhams, is about $600,000 in profits, which he then used to acquire assets and conceal the origins of the funds through bank transactions.
And the Prosecutor General has asked Armenia's National Assembly to authorize criminal proceedings against Seyran Ohanyan, head of the opposition Armenia Alliance faction and former defense minister, and fellow bloc member, parliament member Artsvik Minasyan. Ohanyan is accused of illegally appropriating state-owned land in the Gegharkunik's Derakhtik community, part of the Sevan National Park. While serving as defense minister, prosecutors alleged he built a private home there without legal rights and failed to report it in his asset declarations. Minasyan, who was Minister of Environment at the time, is accused of turning a blind eye to the alleged violations, causing significant harm to the state. No request has been made for pre-trial detention. Parliament is expected to take up the matter during the next week's 4-day session.
And the Parliamentary Committee on Defense and Security has rejected a controversial bill that would have allowed conscripts to serve a shorter term in the army by paying a fee. Earlier, the Armenian government had approved the bill, which proposed that citizens between the ages of 18 and 32 could serve for just 1 month by paying about $61,000 or 4 months by paying $46,000. The bill sparked criticism from human rights advocates who warned it could deepen inequality by creating different rules for those who can afford to pay and those who cannot.
And this week, Yerevan's municipality announced that the Achapnyak metro station project has received a positive review and is moving into its next phase. This includes securing full government funding, launching land acquisition and relocation efforts in the affected area, and preparing for a construction tender. The investment package has already been submitted to Armenia's Public Investment Committee, chaired by the Prime Minister. Meanwhile, City Hall is preparing to initiate the legal process to officially designate the metro expansion as a project of public interest.
And as always, we like to tell you about the articles that we published this week. Today's was by Tikran Yegavian. It's called The Armenian Soul in Buenos Aires. He explores the Armenian-Argentine experience, and he ponders whether a diaspora can sustain Armenianness without a homeland, reflecting on identity, disconnection, and the enduring spirit that brings dispersed peoples together across generations and continents.
Another piece, Growing Up on the Border, Youth Narratives of War, Peace, and Home, that we published this week. It's by Gaine Ghazarian. It's her own research where she went to border communities and spoke with teenagers about how they feel, what they want, how they envisage, what's their situation. And it's very interesting because firstly, the photography is beautiful, but before that, it's a point of view that we never talk about or take into consideration, and there's definitely difference of opinions between people who are actually on the border,
right, and those living in the
those
cities.
of us
Yeah.
living in the cities or even further away from Armenia.
Yeah, that's true. The next one is by our own Haranush Dermoyan. It's called Childcare, the Working Mother's Dilemma in Armenia. And really, childcare options are limited, especially for, working mothers. They have short parental leave. Many Armenian mothers are forced to choose between career and caregiving. She explores the systemic failures behind Armenia's childcare crisis and what it means for women, families, and economic growth.
And I get the ones with the photos. Well, another piece that we published, I don't even want to say article because it's such a multimedia piece. The Armenian refugee who photographed a defining era of European migration. It's about Studio Rex, a photo studio founded by an Armenian genocide survivor, Asadr Köseyan, in Marseille. And for decades, Köseyan has documented, for 2 generations, him and his son documented European migration. These once practical photographs have become powerful historical artifacts chronicling diverse immigrant experiences from the 20th century, because there was a retrospective exhibition with the archives recently, and they just really shed a new life.
It was a fascinating story to read, to be honest. Really, really interesting. And I would encourage our listeners to go check it out because the photos and the story. Yeah.
And his relationship to his clients.
Yeah. And how they describe how different ethnicities, how they want it to be portrayed.
And this one case where someone saw a wedding photograph in display and wanted to have his head and his wife's head superimposed on that photograph.
Which was an Armenian wedding.
To send back home.
Yeah. And next we have Christopher Atamian's column, Art Speak, and it's about Judith Simonian. I'm loving this because I'm discovering artists that I didn't know existed. It's called Inside the Mind's Eye, The Bold Vision of Judith Simonian. She had a solo show at J.J. Murphy Gallery in New York, and Atamian writes that it unveils vivid layered canvases where absence, abstraction, and narrative tension converge. Her psychologically rich, formally inventive works transform everyday scenes into uncanny meditations on memory, perception, and the human subconscious.
And last week we had published last Friday this month's security report, and as always, Maria, you did a podcast with Nerses Kopalian. It's called Examining the Context, and just as a reminder, this month's security report was titled "The Quartet and Securitized Minilateralism: France, India, Poland, and Armenia's New Security Paradigm," and we spoke a lot about France and India just in this week's Week in Review, so do check it out, listen to the podcast.
Yeah, it's an interesting take on how Armenia can develop a partnership, a minilateral partnership with these countries to shore up its own security needs, and why these countries would even be interested, what their interests are, why they would want to do it. I think it was a very interesting conversation that we had.
And also, though, with the recent situation on our borders with Iran and Israel, a lot of projecting and planning might need to
because
to use one of Kopalian's favorite words, pivot.
Pivot. Well, no, the problem there is that if that border, for whatever reason, is closed, that leaves Armenia with only one open border through Georgia. I mean, it's
and we can't even get flowers through.
Yeah, Armenia's link with Iran is extremely vital for our country. So this is something that we will be watching very closely, and hopefully
the world will be watching very closely.
Hopefully it will settle down, although I'm not very optimistic at this point. But that's the kind of week we've had here in Armenia. Thank you for listening. Have a safe and peaceful weekend, and we will be back again next week.